Body attendance, the book is going around. I believe everyone's here, so that means item 2 is easy because there's no apologies for absence, unless I'm mistaken. No, I'm not. I can count to 8 still. Number 3 then is declarations of interest. Pass over to Stella.
Thank you, Leader. With regard to the Green Meadow Community Farm report, members who have been appointed onto the Green Meadow Community Farm Shadow Board will have a personal interest in relation to this item. It's not a prejudicial one. I understand that Councillor Mandy Owen has been appointed onto the board, so if perhaps Councillor Owen could confirm this personal interest.
Yes, confirm that.
Thank you. I'm not aware of any other interests. Thank you.
Okay, members happy with that? No other interests to declare? Let's move on then to item number 4, which is the confirmation of the Cabinet minutes from the 9th of July. I'll take you through those page by page. They start at page 3, 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, and page 10. The Welsh language version then is from page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14, page 15, page 16, page 17 and page 18. Any matters arising from those minutes? I would draw your attention to 7.4 on page 5 about the importance of lobbying the Welsh Government. That's something that's been going on in earnest down at the Assembly and with Welsh Government ministers about the importance of a fair settlement for local services going forwards. I co-signed a letter both approaching the UK Treasury and to the Welsh Government about the importance of that, and that's something I'm sure we'll continue to come back on. So that lobbying work is going ahead in earnest, making clear the importance of funding for local services and the consequences of different decisions. I hope the comprehensive spending review at a UK level signifies a change of direction in terms of the funding of public services, and I look forward to working with the Welsh Government to ensure that has a real impact for our services here in Torfaen. Can we agree those minutes then as an accurate record? Right, item 5 then is updates on actions. Anything to add here, Chief Executive?
No, thank you, Leader. There are none today.
Okay, that's great. Then on to item 6 then, which is the financial forecast. I'm going to hand over initially to Kelly.
Thanks, Anthony. The purpose of this report is to present a financial forecast for the 2019-20 revenue and capital budgets and to provide an update on the estimated reserves position. Nigel will run through the report, but I just wanted to highlight a few points around the forecasted overspend. Currently, as the report outlines, the potential forecast budget shows an overspend of 2.4 million. Just to place that into some context, that's against a net budget of 176.9 million, so less than around 1.4%. The situation in children's services will not be a surprise to members. Councils right across the country, as we know, are facing similar financial challenges in this area. There's lots of work ongoing to try and address this both locally and nationally. Amongst local actions, members will be aware that it is a key focus of the Council's T22 programme, with work well underway. With regard to the forecast position in neighbourhood services, I am reassured that the Chief Officer is pushing ahead with an action plan to address this challenge. We've talked many times about the effect of nearly a decade of austerity on council budgets across the country, with most, if not all, facing similar financial challenges. This isn't unique to Torfaen. I just wanted to make that clear. I'll hand over to Nigel now. Can you talk us through the report?
Okay, before we hand over to Nigel, I know it's a fairly significant milestone in Nigel's career this week. We're very lucky to have someone of such experienced standing in the local government finance community. So I thought it would be remiss of me not to comment on that and to thank Nigel for his service over the years and in the years to come.
40 years. It's a different world on the 10th of September 1979, I can tell you that. But it's not just me. Mark Horton in Education started the same day as me. And I just poked my head into Mark and said, happy 40 years. So,
not literally, I hope.
No. So, yeah, Mark and I started the same day, Monday the 10th of September 79. As the executive member has said, this report captures the month 4 forecast position, and it no doubt represents, a serious forecast position. As the executive member said, 2.4 million against a net budget of 177 million. What I would say is that whilst we must resolve this position with some determination and vigour, we must do it as a collective without creating any sense of crisis. The latter simply results in behaviours that will impede rather than support a sustainable resolution. We've always done that as a council, and I think that's a strength. Table in 5.1 shows the overall forecast position, and that for each service area. Obviously, the two key areas of social care and housing and neighbourhood services. Before I just canter through those in a little bit of detail, a couple of things I want to bring out. I've brought into the forecast £200,000 of assumed surplus on collection of council tax, and capital financing is forecasting a reasonably significant underspend due to a review of borrowing levels and assumptions. Ordinarily, I wouldn't bring those into the forecast at this stage. I would be using those to bolster reserves and balances at the back end. But given the overall position, I think it's prudent to do so at the moment. So in 5.2, that articulates in some detail the pressures in both social care and housing and neighbourhood services. I'm not going to repeat the report in detail, but some key points. 2 million of the forecast position relates to children's services, with a number of placements showing a significant increase over budgeted levels, and that's despite the increased investment of budget time. The majority of councils in both Wales and England are experiencing pressures in children's services. As far as we're concerned, this is a whole authority stroke whole system issue, and is not one for only Keith to resolve, and it's not one that only Keith can resolve. It's a collective endeavour on behalf of us all to turn this around. The other significant pressure area within the service areas and achieve mitigations. Some relates to assumed regional grant monies, and we'll continue to push to try and secure stroke use more of this resource. And then the other area obviously relates to the community farm. There's a report elsewhere on the agenda that's going to deal with the farm, but notwithstanding that, there's still an agreed budget mitigation which won't be achieved for 1920, and so therefore the report suggests we will underpin that from the general fund balance, but we must continue in efforts to reduce that subsidy to the level that's within the budget. Otherwise it will simply create a pressure in future years. As we recognise as a council, children's services are a key and urgent part of T22, and paragraph 5.2.2 details all the work that is in train, and members of Cabinet will see that that's an extensive amount of work that is in train. There's 4 main strategies, and the detail is there, and work is carrying on at pace. We're also learning from a lot of other councils that have actually transformed children's services. There's a paragraph in there that I draw your attention to. It says, in summary, a range of promising change activities being developed and delivered well and at pace in children's services and the wider system. Some of this will impact positively in 1920 and some will impact in 2021. Nature, scale and timing is being quantified during September. And the report brings out later on that we'll bring a further report back in October that updates on month 5 and updates on all that activity. Also within that section you've got specific activities that Keith's putting in train specifically in response to this monitor. 5.2.4 and 5.255 then detail the reasons for the significant forecast position and the remedial action, some of which are historic in terms of the reasons that Rachel's put in to mitigate the position. And at the moment the activity is expected to reduce the forecast by around 400,000, but further areas are being examined. There's some brief commentary then on 1819, a couple of mitigations that are still to be fully achieved. And then importantly, the report also brings out the need for all services to look to underspend and reduce spend wherever possible to assist the bottom line. In normal circumstances, I have always allowed service underspends to be carried forward to service-specific reserves, but I think in 1920 our collective discipline must hold, and they'll have to be used to assist the overall council bottom line. Paragraph 5.5 outlines supplementing the in-year intervention and prevention budget with a carry-forward reserve to both support T22 and intervention and prevention. Obviously, use of reserves is an executive function, and therefore I've rolled it in here for you to just agree that we'll supplement the budget with the carried-forward reserves. Section 6 takes us through the achievement or anticipated achievement of agreed mitigations. And whilst we've got some classes high risk, I think if you look at the table overall, achievement against agreed mitigations is solid. Section 7 is all about reserves and their projected usage. Key points: a deteriorating position, and that's without the impact of the current forecast. So it's imperative we make every effort to mitigate the current forecast so that we improve our overall financial standing. And obviously the Wales Audit Office are looking at the financial resilience and financial standing of all councils across Wales. The last part of the report covers capital. The recommendations are in section 10. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Nigel. Any questions or comments before we move to this? Okay. I'm reassured by the report that we seem to be taking those collective and calm sort of strategic decisions to address this, and that this isn't just a problem that's facing us in Torvine, both in terms of children's services and the wider picture as well. It does show, however, the need both for those sort of collective and calm actions and for, as I said earlier in today's meeting, a fair settlement that gives local services a break after 10 years of austerity, which is sucking the life out of local services. And without that, in addition to our calm and responsible management, I think local services will start to suffer. And maybe when people like me refer to local services, that sounds a bit bland, but we're talking schools, we're talking social care for the vulnerable, we're talking the environmental services that we run as a council. So I think that's vital that that both we take the actions that are necessary here, but also above ourselves with the macroeconomic situation and with national government at UK level and at Welsh Government level, we all work together to secure the future of public services as we know them, because the alternative doesn't bear thinking about. If members are happy then for us to move to page 30, recommendations at 10.1, it's recommended that the forecast position in respect of each service area noted, the actions being taken by the relevant service chief officers to address their adverse variances are endorsed, the budget for intervention, prevention and T22 is supplemented for 2019-20 by the carried forward reserve as outlined in paragraph 5.5, and lastly that specific approvals relating to the use or amendment of reserves are only actioned by the executive member for resources in accordance with normal practice. Are we happy to approve that report? Show of hands. Thank you, that's carried. Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Kelly. Right, then if we move to the next agenda item, which is item 7 on Greenmeadow Community Farm, an update to the costings for scrutiny committee recommendations. And if I hand over to Mandy initially and then to Keith.
Thank you, Anthony. The purpose of today's report is to provide Cabinet with an update on the work carried out and progress in 7 recommendations made by the Cleaner Scrutiny Committee to address the Greenmeadow Farm budget mitigations for 1920, and to make recommendations to enable Cabinet to make a decision on the next steps of the review and any future changes to the operation of the farm. It should be noted that there is no intention to close the farm, and we all want to ensure that the long-term sustainability. The financial position facing the Council on the farm has resulted in a mitigation being approved to reduce the subsidy required to operate by $200,000 as part of the budget setting. This approval was subject to a recommendation from the Cross-Cutting Resources Committee, where members supported the budget proposal to reduce the level of subsidy, but wanted a task group set up to look at options for implementation. In the process of the review, the Task and Finish group have met 5 times, have spoken to a range of staff and stakeholders to understand the current situation of the farm and the benefits and challenges it faces. They have identified possible options for consideration that may deliver against the required savings and agreed for these recommendations to be costed before any decision was made. These recommendations and responses can be found at the beginning of paragraph 6.2 of the report. So I'll now hand you over to Keith, who will be able to give you some more detail and answer any questions that members may have.
go through it one by one, or whether or not we just move to the key caveats and assumptions against all of those recommendations, because they are all detailed fully in the report. So in terms of recommendation 1, I mean, in terms of the building, obviously the significant work would be needed to be done to the building to bring it up to a decent standard. There's no sort of decision in terms of any service moving in there, and indeed I think for any service to move in there, there's got to be an assumption that the works would be even greater to make it fit for office accommodation or anything like that. Recommendation 2, then there's a whole issue around the ecological usage or problems in doing anything with the land, and I think what we think is we need a further look at some of that. We need conversations with our colleagues in neighbourhoods around the assumptions that have been made. Staffing reductions can be absorbed. I mean, I think those are being achieved as we go on. I'll look at Dave to confirm that. In terms of the catering, I think the recommendation is that we would need to take a further look at this. There's the report talks about moving to vending and that type of thing, but I think at this moment in time, it actually is making a small profit. So we just need to have another look at it. And I think I'm moving probably beyond this report, but I think there is some other options that we could consider in terms of maybe a collaboration with the local college, or indeed looking at a social enterprise in terms of the catering facilities. I suppose in terms of where we then go, the next steps is about perhaps setting up a small task and finish group with officers and some key members from the Cabinet to take this forward, and then to bring a further report later on to Cabinet with further better worked up recommendations. I have to say that in terms of the staff, I'm glad that a decision has been made now that the farm will remain open, but of course they are aware that further changes may still need to take place, and probably will need to take place to maintain the farm and its future and sustainability. So I'm happy to try and answer any questions. Dave's here to try and help with any of the financial issues.
Okay, any questions or comments for Keith or Wendy and that? Dave?
With regards to recommendation 2, which is talking about the use of surplus land, it seems to be kind of a blanket kind of conclusion that none of it is savable and none of it has any sort of capital value. But it also sort of talks about looking further into that. Is there any development on that? Because I think that is one recommendation that sort of echoes with me. I think if we can make any capital receipt from any of the land, reinvest that into the farm and into sort of changing say purpose of the farm. So the introduction of like soft play or an adventure park or something like that, you're increasing the revenue by having an additional thing for people to come and visit. I mean, it takes away from the educational value, but it also adds to entertainment, which is what brings in the money.
There's been some discussions around further developments, but further developments would cost, there'd have to be a capital input. I mean, I was at the farm one day, and I think they realised I wasn't a farmer because I was in a suit, and some members of the public came up to me and actually said, what you need up here is something for young children, a soft play. And I just said, well, everything is is up for consideration. And I think now the decision has been made not to dispose of the farm. We can move on and look at some of these things. I think there does need to be a pushback on what we can do with the land. A blanket response almost is that for ecological reasons we can't do anything. We need to have another look at that. I know that Councillor Owen has mentioned to me in the past that there was a pocket of land, that there was discussions years ago that some of it could be sold off or gifted to another organisation to build houses on. So I think we just need another look. But I think, if that's what members want, I'm happy to do that with Emma and Jason. We'll take this forward. It is a little bit of light relief compared to the normal day-to-day job. I think, there is some things we need to do. But I think that the farm's got to change. I don't think there's any doubt about that. It's got to change in terms of its current offer. You know, I just don't think it's got any real purpose in terms of how it generally is. And I think, you know, if you go there and I went up there and had a walk round, and I think the public going there, it's very visible that there's been no investment. There's not even been a coat of preservative put on a fence. I mean, it looks incredibly shabby, and I think we just need to make some decisions around the long term, you know, what we are going to do. And I think, you know, the idea of a small task and finish group setting up some other groups, you know, to look at it may be a way of doing it. And I think, you know, potentially bringing in partners such as the college, you know, this is just something we thought of. Perhaps they could run a catering course from there. They could do other events in the evening that they do. You know, it's just things that, you know, I think they're worth considering. You know.
Just to come back in there, I mean, I think that's sort of helpful in a way, because I think that focuses our minds that doing nothing is not an option. We have to do something. We have to make this place sustainable, because I think the message that's loud and clear and that is echoed in our report is that the public value the place, and that losing it would be an unacceptable option. To do that and to safeguard the future of it, I think we have to look at repurposing it and look at new ways of developing the place and giving a new offer to the public. So I think, in a way, that focuses our minds. We have to do something. But I'm very glad that the very first line, a substantial line in this, is that we do not intend to close it, because I think that message needs to get out there, that that's never been the case. We do value it, but we want to see it flourish, survive, more than survive, just do really well, and couldn't think of the right word, but we value it. So I just think that's important to state.
Yeah. I'd like to explore this notion of the tracts of land that we've identified as, now at least we're identifying as a possibility that it does require further looking at. At the moment, because that suggests to me that currently the view is that that isn't a viable proposition. If that is the case, why is it the case? What are the objections to using the surplus pieces of land? What is actually happening to those surplus pieces of land at the moment? If they're lying fallow, if they're not doing anything, surely it's ripe for this serious consideration. And if it is going to be from now on something that we can seriously look at, when are we going to start to look at that seriously? And another point as well, I'm interested in these two plots of land in other areas removed from the farm. What's the potential for using that to bring in some capital that can then be transferred into the farm and used to sustain that?
I think we probably need to have a small group look at each of those plots of land and exactly what is possible or feasible with them. I think, you know, we've gone back to colleagues and they've said, no, the only value is ecological. There are issues with some of the lands in terms of floodplains and this sort of thing. But I think we just need to really bottom it out in a way that perhaps we haven't been as thorough. You know, but I think part of that has been, you know, whilst we determine the long-term future of the farm, because if it was going to continue as a farm, then obviously it would need the land. The land isn't being left fallow. I mean, animals are moved around the borough to graze on it. There's a lot of trees being planted on one other area, and of course, on the main body of the farm, some of it is used. We've got green wellies operating up there from social care. There's others where the tractor goes out and takes children around for the tractor ride. So I don't think it's been left, but we just need to see what can be done in terms of consolidating it, I think.
And with respect, we need to treat that project with some urgency, because until we can underline the fact that either A, we can utilise that land, or B, we choose not to, that's not going to be until we have a thorough research and a thorough look at it. So when are we going to start that?
I think if we're going to set up a task and finish group as a recommendation from today, we'll start it as soon as that group can meet. I'd just like to reassure you, though, Councillor, a lot of work has been done on this, but I just think it needs drawing together in a different, more strategic way than perhaps it has. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that work has been done, but I also appreciate that we're not making any kind of penetrative progress in that sense, are we? And perhaps it's about time that we did.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, accept that.
Anyone else want to come in before I do? I just wanted to thank Keith and thank Emma and everyone who's contributed to this report, and also to thank the workers' scrutiny members in taking this forward as they have done. I think they've clearly exhibited the value that members hold to the farm, and they've recognised that there's a job of work for us to do to make that sustainable. Talking about key message at the top of section 3 there, I think both parts of that statement are crucial, and it has to be read as a whole. There's no intention to close Green Meadow Community Farm, and we wish to ensure its sustainability in the longer term. I think it's tempting for people in a very binary way just to read one part of that statement, and we have to read both, and we need to work together to make sure we put the farm on a sustainable footing, not just try and sort of dig into the status quo and then end up back here every year, time after time after time. I'm really keen that we do look to the long term. We do show that it's not a binary choice between the status quo or closure, that we're imaginative as we can be, that we bring in as many people from the community, as many experts in different fields as possible. Because it seems to me that the farm, it's unique in many respects in the services that we provide. There's so many different aspects to it. It's part provider of something with social value. It's part visitor attraction. It's part agricultural facility. And that's lots of different sort of skill sets that are needed in each of those things. You have to be able to run a farm, you have to be able to market something, and you have to be able to sort of ensure that social value. And I'd like to pay tribute to the staff at the farm. I know it's not been easy for them over the past few months, but I hope they know that what we've done's not been out of disrespect to the job they're doing. It's about trying to ensure that the job they do is sustainable going forwards. So I think, as I say, both parts of that statement are key. We can't just try and dig in around the status quo. Otherwise, I fear that either we or our successors will be back here in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time trying to tackle the same question. And that's not a question that we ask because we don't care. It's a question we have to ask because of the funding situation that's facing us as a whole. As a council, we have a responsibility to provide services at a very acute level. We have a responsibility to be able to fund our schools properly. That's difficult in the current climate. We have a responsibility to be able to protect vulnerable children, vulnerable older people, disabled people, and that's not easy in the current climate. And all these things compete together, and we end up in the situation where we're trying to spin too many plates at once. So I'm keen that we do seek an imaginative, a long-term solution for the farm that enables it to flourish. Because as you say, we've not been able to invest as we'd have wanted to in a capital sense, and maybe that has taken its toll over the years, despite the hard work of the staff and despite the fact that many local people value the farm tremendously. So I think there's lots of ideas to explore there, but we need to as David said, really create some momentum and some firming up of those ideas, that they aren't just ideas, they're actual things that we can do. I think the subgroup is the right thing to do to take that forwards. I'm glad you mentioned something that Dave and other members have mentioned, Mandy and other people have mentioned, about the idea of social enterprise or partnership with other bodies to try and take that forward, because I don't think it's something we can just do on our own. So I would recommend this report and thank officers for the way that they've gone about this. I know it's not easy because as members on one side we're trying to protect core services, and on the other side, when people come up with suggestions, we balk at them because they're things that we value. In the 10th year of austerity, there's no easy choices, no things that we can easily get rid of. They're things that we value about that are competing with each other, and I think that's the spirit in which this report tries to move us forward. Anyone else want to come in at this point? If I can move us to the recommendations then on page 42. I won't read them all out because they're quite long and you've probably heard enough of my voice already, but there's 6 bullet points there, so it's recommended that Cabinet at 15.1 approves this report and those 6 bullet points below. Are we Show of hands in favour. Thank you, and thank you, Keith.
Okay.
And please pass our thanks to Emma and all the other members of staff that have worked on this. Right, we can move now to agenda item 8, which is the Business Continuity Management Strategy and Policy Statement. If I can bring in Lynn and Paddy first.
Thank you, Leader. Good morning, Cabinet. The report you have before you today is asking you to formalise the approach of managing critical and significant issues that affect the Council on occasions in terms of business continuity. A huge lot of work has gone into developing this strategy, and compliments to Neil Jones at the top, who's led a lot of this work going forward. We manage significant issues and business continuity matters well as a council. What we haven't got is a documented formal approach on how we do that, and this strategy really pulls together the elements we need to consider as a council when we are facing some significant disruption. The issues that we have are around our services and how we bring those services back online as quickly as we can. In the process of managing this, we've been liaising with all of our service departments. We have a business continuity executive group that we pull together to help us develop this approach. Our approach will be going forward that we will have what we call in super priority areas. So it's those areas that will have a significant impact on life and limb services, reputation to the council, financial impact. And back in those statements that will be business impact assessments, which again Neil and his team has travelled across to each of the local authority senior management teams to discuss with those teams what are their critical business activities, and we've been doing an analysis of the impact around those. Once those business impact assessments are done, we will then be using those to liaise with our colleagues up in the SRS around our systems that we need to bring up online. The internet and our SRS systems is the lifeblood of everything we do. Without those systems, we can't operate. And part of this element is to clearly identify within a document that sits behind the strategy, in the event of an emergency at a certain point in time, because we have different emergency situations during a different time of year. For example, if we've got an election period, then election software takes precedence. If we have exams in schools, it's take precedence. So in all of this, it's a joining up, a more formal joining up of the approaches that we're going to take. The systems that will be brought up online will be done in liaison with those professionals within those service areas to ensure that we've got the right information at the right time, linked to the SRS's approach on our priority systems to bring up. So that's really the essence of this document. It's formalising our approach. I think it's a much more clearer, concise way in which we manage things. Within the policy also we have the systems of who's responsible for what, so there's a clear delineation of who is involved in the process at any one time. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on the report? I think it's one of those areas that seems quite dry and technical, but then it's about what happens when the poo hits the fan, to put it as politely as I can do. And it's important if that happens, if some event outside our control happens, that we've got the plans in place to ensure that, as you say, life and limb services continue and that the disruption is minimised. So, as it is behind the scenes and quite technically, it's not the kind of work that people often get thanked for, but it is very valuable. So thank you to both Neil and yourself and everyone who's contributed to this. We're okay to move then to the recommendations on page 53. 9.1, Cabinet approved the Business Continuity Management Strategy and Policy Statement attached as Appendix 1 and instruct the head of PSSU, that's Lyndon, to implement across the council. Are we happy in favour of that? That's carried. Thank you, Lyndon. Right then, if we move to the final substantive agenda item, which is item 9, participation in the Patrol Adjudication Joint Committee. I'm going to hand over to Fiona initially on this.
Thank you, Leader. Cabinet approved a joint civil parking and environmental enforcement service in April. This report follows that process and relates to civil parking enforcement and membership of the Adjudication Joint Committee. There's a statutory duty to make provision for independent adjudication for parking and traffic penalties. This is carried out through the Traffic Penalty Tribunal, TPT. A joint committee of over 300 local authorities in England and Wales provide resources to support independent adjudicators and their staff who compromise of the TPT. This report requests that the memorandum of participation in the Joint Committee is agreed and that I'm appointed as the councillor nominated to sit on the Joint Committee. And I'll pass over to Stephen Jarrett.
I don't think there's a great deal to add to Fiona's introduction there. This is part and parcel of the appeals process for parking penalty charge notices. It is something that we need to enter into, so it's just going about executing that process. Thank you.
Any questions on this before we move to the recommendation, which is on page 69? That the local authority agrees to participate in the Patrol Adjudication Joint Committee, it's a tongue twister, that the memorandum of participation in the Patrol Adjudication Joint Committee is signed and sealed and the agreement is executed, and lastly that the executive member Environment, Ms Fiona, as the councillor, be nominated to sit on the Patrol Adjudication Joint Committee. Are we happy in favour of that? That's carried. That brings to an end today's Cabinet agenda. Thank you all for attending and thank you for the officers' reports.